Well, hello again and welcome. Today we find ourselves in St. Barth, and we're going to be making the short trip over to the island of Saba, which is reputed to have the shortest runway in use by any airport with scheduled commercial traffic. Only about 1,300 feet. We'll say more about that in a moment. But there's a couple of things I want to say before we take off. The first is, as you can see, we're no longer in the Duke. We've been using the Duke, the Real Air Piston Duke, for most of the flights that we've done up to now. And I use it primarily because it reminds me of the Cessna 310 I used to fly many, many years ago. But even though we've used it for airports like Culebra and even St. Bart's here, it really is not an ideal short field airplane, I guess you can say, and certainly not in airports that are classified as extreme at all. And so I wanted to do something that was more realistic. Obviously, in the sim, you can do just about anything you want. You can probably squeeze a Duke in there and to Saba and find a way of getting it off the ground and all the rest of it. But in real life, you probably wouldn't use an airplane like that. Most of the airplanes that go into Saba are either Twin Otters or Britten-Norman Islanders, both of which are designed to land and take off in very short runways. And so I was thinking about what airplane I might use for that. I don't have either of those. I don't have an Islander or a Twin Otter in my sim. And so my good friend Billy, with whom I used to fly many, many years ago, suggested I do it in the Bonanza. Bonanza is a fun airplane. It's an airplane that should be able to get in to Saba without any problem. It certainly is a fun airplane to fly around the islands, for sure. And so that's what we're going to do. This is a Coronado F-33 Bonanza, and that's what we're going to be flying today. The other thing that I wanted to mention today is the scenery. I'm not sure I mentioned enough about the scenery when I landed. This is the St. Barth scenery from Fly Tampa. Actually, the package itself includes 3 airports. Includes St. Martin, includes St. Bart's, and it includes the specialized scenery for Saba. And I only point this out to stress something I've said before, which is whenever you're going into some of these specialized airports, I mean, having good custom scenery always enhances the flying experience in the simulator, obviously. But whenever you're going into specialized airports that have very complex approaches and all the rest of it, if you really want to appreciate the approach, to have some sense of what it's like to get into these airports, you really need to have good custom scenery to do it. The default scenery simply will not do. And this, as you can see, is beautiful scenery. You will see the same thing when we go over to Saba. So the Fly Tampa scenery for these 3 islands is highly recommended if you're interested in recreating some of these flights. And so let's go ahead. We'll say a few more things as we go along, but let's go ahead and get started. And as we start taxiing here, I'll just, you can probably notice from this perspective a little bit more than when we were landing. This is the approach that we followed, the path that we followed as we landed over on runway 10. And as you can see, this really gives you a better appreciation than when you're actually on the approach. You can see how the contour of the hill blends with the runway, so to speak, which means that when you get to the roundabout up there, it's not enough merely to cut the power and sort of glide down, because you'll float and not be able to touch in time to stop. You really have to cut the power and pitch down, follow the contour, and come into the runway. That's part of what makes it very tricky. You want to be as close as you can to the ground, but especially with the turbulence, you certainly don't want to hit the ground or anything on the way down before you actually get to the runway. So as we get lined up for takeoff, I want to do something a little bit different than we've done in other airports. We usually try to fly the correct procedures as we're coming into these airports. But today we're going to do something a little bit different, both leaving St. Bart's and coming into and coming into Saba. What I'd like to do is to take off on runway 10. You see that there's a little bay at the end of the runway, and then there's a hill and some obstacles on the other side. We have to turn left, which is a normal way to get out. But instead of just exiting the pattern, I just want to go ahead and turn around and return in the opposite direction to get an appreciation for what runway 28 is like, and maybe get a different sense of the lay of the land in St. Barth. So let's go ahead, and we got booster pump, we got flaps, and let's go ahead and get started. I'm gonna get rid of these visors. Tried to find a setting that eliminates them once and for all, but I haven't been able to do it. I have to sort of hide them every time I take off. So here we are, we're coming up on 60 knots. Remember, we're going a little bit downhill here. 70 knots, 75. Here we go. Gear coming up. Left turn. We've cleared the obstacles. We're going to go ahead and bring the flaps up. 85 knots. I'm going to separate a little bit here so I can make it 180 and then come back in the opposite direction and show you something you don't normally see in looking at this airport. It's about 600 feet. Let's go ahead and adjust the prop here. I'm going to leave it at 2,500. Just going to go ahead and turn around. I think of about 240 here, I guess. If you'll see straight ahead, if you look at the previous video, that's Remy de Haenen's original residence, which is now the Eden Rock Hotel. If you're making one of these approaches over here, that is your point, your decision point, to decide whether you're going to go around. If you're not in proper altitude and speed when you get to the house, you really should be going around. But it gives you a different perspective of how short the runway is. You see how it's clearly uphill. There's a terminal building. And you see, this is the problem. When you're coming in this direction, it really blocks your options in terms of a go-around. And so I just thought it'd be interesting to show you that perspective there. Go ahead and put some climb power again. And turn to a heading of about 250. And sure enough, Saba is straight ahead. We're going to go up to about 2,000 feet. Flaps are up, pumps are up. Using 25-25 and 23-23. A little bit longer trip than it was from St. Martin over to St. Bart's, but just a little bit more. Getting back to what I was saying before, with Billy suggesting this airplane for the trip, certainly would be fun to have a little Bonanza like this to fly around the islands, although I have to say that anybody who knew me way back then knew that the moment I had my multi-engine rating, I, justified or not, developed a bias against flying single-engine airplanes over large extents of water. And so I'm not sure, even if I had the chance, I would be making these trips in a Bonanza as much fun as I'm sure it would be. And I know all the statistics, and I know how reliable engines are these days, but it's just something that once it gets in your mind, it's difficult to get rid of. As Billy was suggesting that I use the Bonanza, let me go ahead and adjust some cruise power here for 2,000 feet. Billy reminded me that one time, then he suggested that we fly. We had a little de Havilland Chipmunk back then, and he suggested that we fly in the Chipmunk from San Juan to St. Thomas, and I refused on that particular day. Maybe I was too cautious. Some people are not cautious enough when they're younger. I think I was too cautious way back then. In any event, I didn't feel confident enough. I remember when we used to do some maneuvers on the Chipmunk. You put some G's on it, the engine would choke a little, and all the rest of it. And I just didn't feel comfortable going to 30 or 40 minutes each way to St. Thomas on that little airplane, as much fun as it was. But here we are. We're flying the Bonanza. It is a lot of fun. Very light on the controls. As I told you in a previous video, I did get checked out on the Bonanza way back then, and was always impressed by how light it was in the controls. I've been flying a lot of Twin Cessnas when I did that, and it just seems so much lighter. And one part of the things of what I like about this particular Carenado airplane is that the controls feel very, very light, similar to what I remember from way back then. Certainly a lot lighter than the Duke. One of the things that I might mention here is, there's a beautiful day with no cloud cover. But if you've not done it before, flying for some extended period over water requires not just navigation over the water. It's not just an art. It requires a great deal of discipline, great deal of trust in your planning and your navigation and your equipment and your headings and your timing. Whenever you have a lot of cloud cover, you've been flying over water for a couple of hours and you can't see anything, and you begin to see the clouds tend to create shadows on the water, and sort of like a mirage, you begin to see stuff that isn't there. It's very easy if you are expecting to see something and you begin to see a shadow to want to change your course and veer over in that direction, and you have to be disciplined to know that I'm still supposed to be X amount of miles and X amount of minutes away from that, and if that doesn't square with whatever I'm seeing, then you forget about what you're seeing and you continue with your plan. It requires a great deal of discipline to do that. Notice I'm going a little bit left of the island of Saba here. The normal approach is entering a left traffic to runway 12. But I want to start by moving in the opposite direction again to show you a little bit, probably not something you would do in real life, but just to show you a little bit of where the airport is and what an amazing job they've done in building that thing. As I mentioned to you when we went to St. Barth, Remy de Haenen was the first person in 1948 to land an airplane in St. Barth. And in 1959, he was the first person to land an airplane over in Saba. And he convinced the people of had great vision, obviously, convinced the people of the importance of making it accessible to air travel, as improbable as it seemed, given the geography and the topography of the island, and convinced the people there was only, as you can see, it's just one big rock with these big cliffs dropping off into the ocean, and it only had one area that was even remotely suitable for landing. As it was something called Flat Point, and he convinced the people to go out there by hand and clear enough of that little flat point for him to be able to go out there with nothing paved or anything else, just to go in there and land an airplane just to prove that it could be done. And so the people bought into the concept, and the rest is history. As I said, the island has been gained a lot of popularity because of the fact that it can be reached by air. It is one of the more unspoiled islands that you can come to because it doesn't have the natural facilities with beaches and everything else that some of the other islands have. But it is considered a great place for scuba diving, for hiking, and for just disconnecting and getting away from everything. And a lot of it has to do with Remy de Haenen's dream of bringing air travel to the island. still a little bit farther away to see it, appreciate it on the screen over here. But as we get a little bit closer, I'll point these things out to you. With this trip and maybe one more trip that I plan to go to Vieques, I'm going to be completing a lot of the initial ideas I had for flights, and I'm probably going to be changing some of the character, some of the flights that we've been doing. Probably start doing some flights in Pilot Edge again for you to see, and maybe changing airplanes as well. Maybe doing some flights, some IFR flights in some actual weather, in the Bonanza and the Duke, and even in a Citation. And so all those things are things that we can look forward to coming up in future flights. I don't know if you can appreciate it now from the screen yet, but you can start seeing a little round outcropping just on the right center of the shoreline there. And that's really where the airplane is. That's that flat point that was there. And little by little, as the graphics begin to clear up, you can start seeing that zigzagging of the road going up from the airport to the halfway up the mountain there. Again, that was done by hand. There was no way of bringing any heavy equipment to clear that out. But they understood the importance, and it was no small task, obviously, the importance of developing those facilities by hand mostly, with very crude tools to be able to improve the economic development of the island. And to their credit, it's a testament to their spirit and their vision that they were able to do both the airport and the road. Slow this down a little bit. Now you can see over here, you can see the runway a little bit better here now. Runway is about 140 feet from the level of the water. And we're just going to go ahead and make a pass on the opposite direction, runway 30. Get a chance to see just how short the runway is. And also see the terminal building on the left side. Again, if you look at the default scenery, you would never see anything remotely similar to this. You really need very, very good, high-quality, specialized scenery to be able to see what we're going to see and to be able to do the approach and land on it. And there we are. That's Flat Point. You can see that there's really no other places around here where anything like this could have been done. You can only imagine what it looked like before the actual paving was done. Not much here. There's a terminal building. There's a runway. And here's a rock that will play a key part in helping you line up on final. Go ahead and gain some altitude here so we can make a turn and slow it down and get ready for the approach. Get some flaps going. Gear down, booster pump. I'll put the prop forward already here. It really needs to be said that even though this is a small airplane, it doesn't mean that you can automatically just take any airplane and put it in here. You still have to manage your speed very well, manage your altitude. or you're not going to be able to get in there. Remember, a lot of the Twin Otters that come in here have reversible props, and this thing does not. So you have to be on your game to be able to. And we're not really dealing with a lot of the turbulence that exists in real life. Turbulence coming off of these cliffs over here on the right. Let's go ahead and put full flaps in here. We're 700 feet. You see the runway ahead. Coming up on 70 knots. There's 70 knots there. 500 feet. One up between 65 and 70 knots, and as soon as we land, we'll bring the flaps up to help the brakes work a little more effectively, and maybe pull back on the yoke and try to get some aerodynamic braking as well. 300 feet. We don't want to be short, obviously. Here we are. It's amazing if you look at some of the actual videos of people coming in here. A lot of these Twin Otters, of course, depends on wind and everything, will actually stop in time to take this first turn off over here, even though they got people in the airplane. It's pretty amazing what these airplanes can do, and these pilots can do. They're very, very good pilots flying into this thing every day, just about. In any event, here we are. Here's a little terminal building. There's some people waiting. We're just going to go ahead and leave it here, shut it down. And thankful that we're on the ground. Hope you enjoyed it. As I said again, we have a couple of more flights in this area, and then we're probably going to be going to a different part of the world to continue to do some flights and explore the beauty of flight simulation. In any event, I hope you enjoyed it. See you next flight, and stay well. Bye-bye.